I buried my Amish husband alone. No neighbors came. No sons stood beside me with their shovels. Just me, the cold ground, and a wooden box I built with my own 2 hands. But it was not the burying that broke me. It was what I found folded inside the lining of his coat 3 days later. A piece of paper that changed the way I understood every single year of our marriage. If you are watching this, I want you to do something for me before I go on. Press that like button, and if you have not already, subscribe to this channel, because I have many more stories like this one to share with you. And tell me in the comments where in the world you are watching from tonight. I read every single one, and it comforts an old woman more than you know. Now let me tell you what happened. My name does not matter so much anymore. Out here, in our community, we do not put much stock in names being remembered. We are taught from the time we are small that pride is a sin, that the self should shrink so the Lord and the family can grow. But for the sake of this telling, you may call me Rebecca. I am 71 years old. I was born on a farm not far from where I sit now, and I have never in my life lived more than 11 miles from that same patch of Pennsylvania soil. My husband's name was Amish. We were married for 48 years before the Lord took him from me this past winter, and I want to tell you about him, about the life we built together, and about the coat. I met Amos at a barn raising when I was 17 years old. I remember it like it happened an hour ago. He was tall, taller than most of the young men in our district, with hands that already looked like a grown man's hands even though he was only 19. He was quiet. Not shy, mind you. Quiet is a different thing than shy. Shy is a man who is afraid to speak. Quiet is a man who has simply decided that most words are not worth spending. And most chose his words the way my mother chose eggs from the hen house, picking them up one at a time, turning them over, checking that they were good before she ever set them in the basket. We courted for a year and a half, which was considered proper in our district. Not too fast and not too slow. He would come by on Sunday evenings in his buggy, and we would sit on the porch, and sometimes we would talk for 2 hours, and sometimes we would sit in silence for 2 hours, and both felt exactly the same to me, which is how I knew he was the one the Lord intended for me. We married in November, after the harvest was in, the way most weddings happen in our community. I wore blue. My mother made the dress. 300 people came to the wedding, and we ate more roasted chicken and creamed celery than I have ever seen in one place before or since. I tell you all this not because I think you especially care about the details of an old woman's wedding day, but because I need you to understand what kind of man Amos was before I tell you the rest. Because what I found in his coat does not make sense unless you understand the man first. Amos was a farmer, like his father before him and his father before that. We had 80 acres, corn mostly, some dairy cows, a good-sized vegetable garden that I tended myself. We raised 6 children together. 4 of them are still living. We lost a daughter, Sarah, to a fever when she was 4 years old. And we lost our youngest son, Daniel, in a farming accident when he was 22. A tractor rollover on a neighbor's land where he had gone to help with the harvest. Though of course Amos never drove tractors himself. We lived plain. But Daniel had taken outside work for a season to save money for his own farm one day. Losing children is a grief that never fully leaves you. It simply learns to live quietly in the same house as you. The way an old dog learns to sleep in the corner without needing attention every minute. Amos worked that farm every single day of his life until his body would no longer let him. Even in his last years, when his hands shook and his back had bent nearly in half from decades of bending over rows of corn and hay bales, He woke before the sun, and he worked until the light was gone. He was not a man who complained. In 48 years of marriage, I do not believe I heard him complain more than a handful of times, and even then it was never about his own suffering. It was always some small worry about whether the rain would come in time for the second cutting of hay, or whether the cows were getting enough feed through a hard winter. He was, in the most complete sense of the word, a good man, faithful to our church, faithful to our community, faithful to me. Or so I believed for 48 years, until the coat told me something different, and something more complicated than I ever expected. I should tell you a little more about our life together, the ordinary shape of it, because I think it is the ordinary things that make a marriage what it truly is, far more than the big dramatic moments people like to talk about. Our days followed the rhythm of the seasons the way they had for generations before us. Spring meant planting, long days behind the horses, Amos walking the fields, checking the soil with his bare hands, rubbing it between his fingers to see if it was ready. Summer meant haying and canning, rows and rows of jars lining our cellar shelves by August, tomatoes and green beans and peaches from the trees my mother-in-law had planted decades before we ever moved into that farmhouse. Autumn meant harvest and the slaughtering of hogs for winter meat, and the quiet satisfaction of a full smokehouse and a full root cellar. Winter meant rest, in the way that farm winters are ever truly restful, mending harness, repairing tools, quilting with the other women of the district, while the men gathered to talk crops and weather and the small news of our small world. Amos and I did not have what the English would call romance, not in the way it is shown in your moving pictures and your magazines. We did not go on dates. We did not exchange gifts wrapped in paper on special occasions. But I want you to understand that what we had was, in its own quiet way, deeper than any of that. It was the way he always made sure my coffee was still warm when I came in from the garden, quietly moving the pot closer to the stove without a word. It was the way I always knew, without asking, which chair at the supper table he preferred, and which of our children needed a firmer hand, and which needed a gentler one, and we simply divided that work between us without ever having to discuss it. It was 48 years of small, unspoken agreements, built up one ordinary day at a time, until they became something as solid and as load-bearing as the beams in our barn. We had our disagreements, of course, as any two people do who share a life and a bed and a household for that many years. Amos could be stubborn about certain things, particularly about matters of farming, where he trusted his own judgment over almost anyone else's, including mine, including at times the judgment of his own father. I could be sharp-tongued when I was tired, and there were evenings after a hard day of canning or a difficult birth among the animals, when I said things to him I later wished I had softened. But we never went to bed angry, not once in 48 years, because his mother had taught him early on that anger left to sit overnight in a house only grows heavier by morning. And he took that lesson to heart more faithfully than almost anything else I ever saw him practice. Let me tell you about his final months, because I think it matters to the story. Amos began to fail around Thanksgiving. It started small, the way these things often do. He grew tired more easily. He would sit down in the middle of chores, which was something I had never once seen him do in all our years together. By December, he had stopped going out to the barn altogether, and my son-in-law and my grandson took over the milking and the feeding. By January, he could barely walk from the bedroom to the kitchen table without stopping twice to catch his breath. We do not believe in going to hospitals unless it is truly necessary, and even then, many families in our community will choose to keep a dying person at home, surrounded by family, rather than have them pass in a sterile room full of machines and strangers. Amos made it clear, in his quiet way, that he wanted to die at home, in the bed we had shared for 48 years, looking out the same window he had looked out of every morning of his adult life. So that is what we did. I nursed him myself, with help from my daughters when they could come, though 2 of them live several hours away by car, which for us plain folks might as well be several days away, since we do not drive automobiles and travel by hired car, or train takes planning and money we did not always have to spare. He passed on a Tuesday morning in the middle of February, during one of the worst cold snaps we had seen in years. I was holding his hand. My daughter Miriam was there, and my son Leafy had come the night before, sensing somehow, the way children sometimes do, that his father did not have much longer. Amos did not say any grand final words. That was not his way. He simply squeezed my hand once, looked at me for a long moment with those pale blue eyes that had not changed one bit in 48 years, and then he was gone. The house went very quiet after that, quieter than I have ever heard a house be in my whole life. Now here is where I need to explain something to those of you who are not familiar with our ways, because it matters greatly to understanding why I ended up burying my husband alone. In our community, death is handled by the family and the church district together. Word spreads quickly, by foot and by phone shanty, and within a day or 2, the men of the community will come together to build the coffin and dig the grave, while the women prepare food and help wash and dress the body. It is not unusual. It is not sad in the way an English funeral is sad. It is simply how things are done. A community holding a grieving family up the way many hands hold up a barn frame before the walls are even nailed in place. But that same week Amos passed, a terrible ice storm moved through our part of the county. Roads were closed. Buggies could not travel safely, not even the short distance most of our neighbors would have needed to come. The bishop sent word that the burial might need to wait several days until the roads cleared, but I could not bear the thought of Amos lying in that cold back room for a week, waiting on the weather to be kind enough to let people travel. And there was something else too, something I have not told many people, something that made me want, almost need, to do this thing myself, alone, without the community around me the way they usually would be. You see, 3 days after Amos passed, before the burial, I was going through his belongings the way a widow does, deciding what to keep, what to pass down to our children, what to give to the church for those in need. And in the closet, hanging on the same hook it had hung on for as long as I could remember, was his good wool coat, the heavy black one he wore to church and to town in the coldest months of winter. I picked it up to fold it, and my hand brushed against something stiff sewn into the lining, near the left breast pocket, something that was not supposed to be there. I want to pause here and tell you something about myself, so you understand why I did not simply set the coat down and forget about it. I am not a woman who goes looking for trouble. I have never once in 48 years of marriage gone through my husband's pockets or questioned where he had been or what he had been doing. That is not our way, and honestly, it was never my nature even before I married into this life. I trusted Amos the way I trusted the sun to rise. It simply never occurred to me not to. But my fingers found that hidden stiffness in the lining, and something in me, some small, quiet voice I had not heard in years, told me I needed to know what it was. I took my sewing scissors, and with hands that were shaking, though whether from grief or from something else I could not say, I carefully cut a few of the stitches along the seam. Inside, folded into a small square, worn soft at the creases, as though it had been folded and unfolded 100 times over many years, was a letter, and beneath the letter, wrapped in a handkerchief, was a small amount of money. More money than I had ever known Amos to have set aside outside of our shared household accounts. Nearly $600 in careful worn bills. I sat down on the edge of our bed, the bed where Amos had died just 3 days before, and I unfolded that letter with hands that would not stop trembling. The letter was written in Amos's own handwriting, that same careful, upright script he used for keeping the farm accounts, dated some 22 years earlier. It was not addressed to me. It was addressed to a woman named Lydia. I want you to understand, before I go further, that I am not telling you this story to shame my husband, or to paint him as something he was not. I loved him for 48 years, and 3 days after his death, sitting on our marriage bed, I loved him still, even as I read words that were not written for me. But I promised you I would tell you what changed everything. And this is it, so I will tell it honestly. The letter spoke of a debt Amos felt he owed this woman Lydia, and of a promise he had made to her, and to himself, that he would never speak of it to another living soul, including me. As I kept reading, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, the story became clear, piece by piece, like watching frost melt off a window pane in patches. 22 years before, when our youngest son Daniel was still a small boy, Amos had gone to help a neighboring family during a bonfire. The Hostetler family, who lived about 6 miles from us. The fire had taken their barn and nearly taken the life of their eldest son, a young man of maybe 19, who had gone back inside to try to save the horses. Amos had gone in after him, had pulled him out through smoke so thick he said in the letter he could not see his own hand in front of his face. The young man lived, though badly burned, but the family lost nearly everything else: their livestock, their equipment, their winter feed stores. Lydia, it turned out, was the young man's mother, the wife of the Hostetler farmer. In the aftermath of the fire, their family fell into terrible debt trying to rebuild. And word within the community, quiet word, the kind that travels through a district without ever being spoken loudly, was that the Hostetler family might lose their farm entirely and be forced to move away, splitting up from the only community and life they had ever known. Amos, in his letter, wrote that he could not stand by and let that happen. Not after looking that young man's mother in the eye in the ashes of her barn and promising her, without really deciding to promise anything, that her family would be all right. So for years, quietly, without a single word to me, without a single word to anyone, Amos had been setting money aside from odd jobs, extra carpentry work he did in the off-seasons that I always assumed simply went toward our own household savings, and sending small amounts to the Hostetler family through a trusted intermediary, enough to help them hold on to their land through the worst years, never so much at once that anyone would notice or ask questions. The letter was, I came to understand, a kind of accounting he had written to himself. A confession almost, explaining why he had never told me, why he felt he could not tell me. He wrote that he was afraid I would think less of him for keeping such a secret from his own wife, even though the secret itself was one of pure kindness. He wrote that pride is a strange and sneaky sin, that even an act of charity can become something a man clings to and hides simply because he does not know how to explain it, without sounding as though he wanted credit for it. And wanting credit for a good deed was, in his mind, nearly as bad as not doing the good deed at all. He wrote one more thing in that letter that I will carry with me until my own last breath. He wrote that he hoped, if I ever found this letter, I would not think he loved me any less for having kept this secret. He wrote that some kindnesses are meant to be carried alone, quietly, the way a man carries a stone in his pocket, not to show anyone, but simply because it is the right weight to carry. I sat on that bed for a long time after reading it. I do not know exactly how long. Long enough that the light outside the window changed from afternoon to evening. And I want to tell you honestly, my first feeling was not anger, though I have talked with other widows since who tell me anger would have been the natural response. Finding out your husband kept a significant secret from you for over 2 decades. My first feeling was something closer to awe. A kind of humbled, quiet awe at the man I had married. A man I thought I knew completely after 48 years, only to discover there was still a whole hidden room inside him I had never once walked into. The money, I later learned when I finally worked up the courage to speak with the Hostetler family, had indeed helped save their farm all those years ago. The young man Amos had pulled from the fire, now well into his 40s with children of his own, wept when I told him what I had found, and told me that his mother, Lydia, had passed some years before, but that she had spoken of my husband's kindness until the day she died, always in careful, quiet terms, honoring the promise of silence Amos had asked of her. Now let me bring you back to that ice storm, and to the burying itself, because I promised you that part of the story too, and I think now you can understand why what happened next felt, to me, almost like it was meant to be. The roads were closed. The bishop said we should wait for help. But I could not wait. Not after reading that letter. Not after understanding in some new and deeper way exactly what kind of man I had been married to for 48 years. I felt, strange as this may sound to you, a kind of fierce need to bury him myself, the way he had quietly, secretly, carried that family's burden all those years without asking for a single soul's help or recognition. It felt right, somehow, that I should carry this last burden for him the same way. My son Levi wanted to help, but the roads truly were too dangerous, sheets of ice over hard frozen ground, and I told him, and I meant it with my whole heart, that this was something I needed to do myself. He argued with me, gently, the way a good son argues with a stubborn mother, but in the end he understood. Or at least he respected me enough to step back. I dug the grave myself, in our small family burial ground at the edge of our property, where Sarah and Daniel already rested, where Amos's own parents rested, and where his grandparents rested before them. The ground was frozen nearly solid in the top layer, and it took me the better part of 2 days, working a few hours at a time between rest. My hands blistering despite my gloves, my back aching in ways I had not felt since I was a much younger woman helping in the fields. I built the coffin myself as well, simple pine boards from our own barn, the same kind of coffin Amos himself had built for his own father years before, and for 2 of our own children. I do not say this to brag about my strength. I say it because there was something sacred in it, something I cannot fully explain even now. Every shovelful of frozen dirt felt like a kind of conversation between us, a last long talk on the porch, the silence between us just as full as any words could have been. I remember the cold most of all, a cold so deep it seemed to live inside my bones rather than simply on my skin. The sky that second day was the color of an old tin pail, low and gray, and heavy with the promise of more snow. My breath came out in thick clouds as I worked, and more than once I had to stop and warm my hands under my arms before I could grip the shovel again. I thought of Amos the whole time, every single minute, not in a mournful way exactly, but in a way that felt almost like company. I thought of him teaching our sons to dig post holes when they were young, telling them that a man should never be ashamed of the dirt under his fingernails. That dirt under the fingernails was simply proof a person had done honest work in this world. I thought of him carrying our children on his shoulders through the very field where I now dug his grave, showing them the first sprouts of corn each spring, patient as the earth itself. When the grave was finally deep enough, deeper than I had thought my own 2 arms capable of digging, I went back to the house and I sat with him one final time before I closed the coffin. I combed his hair the way I had done every morning for the last several months of his illness, when his hands had grown too weak to manage it himself. I straightened his collar. I tucked a small piece of muslin cloth into his breast pocket, a scrap left over from a quilt I had made for our first grandchild many years before, because I wanted him to carry a piece of our family with him, even in the ground. Then I closed the lid myself, and I said a silent prayer, and with a strength I did not know an old woman's body still possessed, I loaded that coffin onto the flatbed wagon we use for hauling hay, and I led our old workhorse, Nettie, the short distance from the house to the family burial ground myself, walking beside her through snow that came up nearly to my knees in places. When I finally laid him in the ground, alone, with no minister present because none could travel, no gathered community to sing the hymns the way we usually would, I stood at the edge of that grave, and I spoke to him. I told him I had found the letter. I told him I understood. I told him that I did not love him any less, exactly as he had hoped I would not. And I told him that I forgave him for the secret, though even as I said the words, I was not entirely certain forgiveness was the right word for what I felt, since what he had hidden was not a betrayal in the way most secrets are, but a kindness he simply did not know how to share. I want to tell you what I have come to understand in the months since, because I think this is the part of the story that matters most, more than the letter itself, more than the money, more than the fire, or the Hostetler family, or any of the details. For 48 years, I believed I knew my husband completely. I believed that after so many decades side by side, there could be no more surprises left between us, that we had become, in some sense, a single quiet unit, thinking the same thoughts before either of us spoke them aloud. And in most ways, that was true. But that coat, that hidden seam, taught me something I think every person needs to learn, whether they are Amish, or English, or anything else entirely. It taught me that even the people we know best in this world still carry rooms inside them we have never entered, kindnesses and burdens and quiet acts of grace that we may never fully know about. Not because those people do not trust us, but because some things are simply too tender, too private, too woven into a person's own private conversation with God, to ever be spoken aloud. I do not think Amos kept that secret because he did not trust me. I have come to believe, in the quiet months since his passing, that he kept it because he understood something true about the nature of real charity, that it asks for nothing in return, not even the comfort of being known for it. He carried that stone in his pocket, as he wrote, for 22 years, and he never once let its weight show on his face, not even to the woman who shared his bed and his life and his sorrows for nearly half a century. In the weeks after the roads finally cleared, the community gathered as they normally would have, a bit late but no less heartfelt, to hold a proper memorial service at our home, the kind with singing and scripture, and long tables of food brought by every family in the district. Neighbors who had not been able to reach us during the ice storm came now, bearing casseroles and bread and quiet condolences, and many of them expressed a gentle sorrow that I had been left to bury my own husband without help, as though it were a wrong that needed righting even after the fact. I did not tell any of them, Not then about the letter or the coat. That secret, at least for those first weeks, still felt like mine alone to carry, the same way Amos had carried his for 22 years. I have since told my children about the letter. Not right away. It took me some months to feel ready to share it, even with them. But when I finally did, my daughter Miriam wept for a long while, and then she told me something I have thought about every day since. She said, "Mother, this does not make Father smaller in my eyes. It makes him larger than I ever understood him to be." And I think she is right. I have thought often, in these quiet months, about why a man like Amos, so honest in nearly every other part of his life, would choose to carry such a secret for so long. I do not believe it was because he thought I would stop him from helping the Hostetler family. If he had told me, I know my own heart well enough to say that I would have supported him fully, would have found ways to help him set aside even more than he managed alone. I think, instead, that it had something to do with the particular kind of humility our people are raised to practice from the earliest days of childhood. We are taught, almost before we can walk, that a good deed spoken of aloud begins to lose some of its goodness, that the speaking of it plants a small seed of pride even in the most well-meaning heart, and that the truest charity is the kind no one ever learns about at all. Amos took that teaching further than most men I have known, further perhaps than even the bishop himself would have asked of him. And I have come to believe that this was simply who he was at the deepest root of his character. A man who would rather carry a weight alone for 2 decades than risk even the smallest shadow of pride touching a good deed. I have also come to understand something about my own grief in the months since his passing, something I did not expect to learn at 71 years old, after already burying 2 children and countless friends and family members over a long life. I have learned that grief and gratitude can live in the very same room together, can sit at the same table, and share the same simple supper, without one canceling out the other. I grieve Amos every single day. I still reach for his side of the bed some mornings before I remember. I still set 2 cups down for coffee some evenings out of 48 years of habit, before catching myself and putting one back in the cupboard. But alongside that grief sits a deep and steady gratitude for the letter, for the coat, for the 2 days I spent digging his grave alone in the frozen ground. Because that solitary labor, hard as it was, gave me something I do not think I would have received any other way. It gave me the space and the silence to understand my husband more completely, in his absence, than I perhaps ever did while he sat across the supper table from me each night. I still have that coat. I sewed the lining back together myself, careful stitches, the same way I have sewn 1,000 things over the years, and I keep it hanging in our closet still, though I know I will never see him wear it again. Sometimes, on hard days, and there have been many hard days since February, I go into that closet and I hold the sleeve of that coat in my hands, and I think about the weight of the stone he carried, and I think about the grave I dug alone in the frozen ground, and I understand now that neither of us, not Amos in his 22 years of silent giving, and not me in those 2 days of solitary digging, was ever truly alone in the way it might have looked from the outside. We were both simply carrying something heavy, quietly, the way our people have always been taught to carry things, without complaint, without needing anyone to see the weight of it. I do not know exactly why I decided to share this story with all of you, strangers on the other side of a camera, in a way of life so different from my own, since our community does not put much stock in photographs or public storytelling at all. Perhaps it is because grief, when it is carried entirely alone, becomes a kind of prison, and even an old plain woman like myself needs somewhere to set the weight down every now and again. Perhaps it is because I hope that somewhere out there, someone is carrying their own hidden kindness, their own quiet burden, and needs to hear that such a thing is not foolish or wrong, that some of the most important parts of who we are will never be fully seen by the people who love us most, and that this is all right. That is simply the nature of a full and complicated human life. If this story touched you even a little tonight, I would be so grateful if you would press that like button before you go. And if you have not yet subscribed to this channel, please do. Because I have more stories to share in the days ahead. Stories about our community. About the life we live out here away from so much of the modern world. About the losses and the small quiet joys that fill up a plain life, the same as any other life. And please, tell me in the comments where you are watching this from tonight. I love hearing how far these words travel. From an old farmhouse in Pennsylvania out into the whole wide world. It means more to me than you know to picture all of you. Wherever you may be, sitting somewhere quiet, listening to an old woman's story about her husband's coat. Thank you for staying with me through this whole telling. I know it was a long one, but some stories cannot be rushed. The same way frozen ground cannot be rushed when you are digging a grave with nothing but a shovel and your own 2 hands. Amos taught me that patience, more than almost anything else, is the truest measure of love. I hope, in some small way, this story has taught you something too. Before I close tonight, I want to leave you with one more thought. Something Amos never said to me directly, but that I have felt in my heart ever since I found that letter tucked away in the lining of his coat. I believe that every one of us, no matter where we live or how we live, whether plain or English, whether young or old, is carrying something quietly that the people closest to us do not fully know about. Some of us carry old sorrows. Some of us carry secret kindnesses, the way Amos did. Some of us simply carry the ordinary weight of getting through a hard season of life. Whatever it is you are carrying tonight, I hope you know that it is all right to carry it quietly, the way our people have always done. But I also hope you know that you are never as alone in that carrying as it might sometimes feel. Rest well, wherever you are, and I will see you again soon with another story from this quiet life of mine.